All right, here we are again for another biology video. Uh, this time I'm going to be talking about part 3 of the Studying Biodiversity Between Ecosystems assignment. And this part is where we're going to start using real data from the Gorongosa National Park to compare ecosystems against each other. Down here in the data table, you can see that there are 4 ecosystems that we are going to compare. And we're going to use the 3 measurements of biodiversity that you practiced in part 2 of this assignment. Now, just to remind you that of the 3 different ways that we are going to measure biodiversity, the first one's called richness, which is the simplest way, most basic way of measuring biodiversity, total number of different species. Just count them, all the different ones. But then we start to think about the fact that the abundance of the organisms matters, like how many of each of those species are there. And this is going to be part of the Shannon Diversity Index. We're going to have to do a little bit more math to find the percentage of the total individuals for each species and use that number to calculate the Shannon Diversity Index. Finally, evenness is the comparing the abundance to see, is there maybe 1 or 2 or a few species that are very, very common, and then all the other species are very rare, or maybe they're all kind of even as a measurement of evenness. Right, so what you need to do is follow the instructions that say go to the Google Classroom and download the data to your Google Drive. And then you open up the spreadsheet as a Google Sheets. And so then you have something that looks like this, right? And so this is a Google Sheet. It is straight from the cameras. So here you'll notice that there is a spot that says camera, and then there's latitude and longitude, which is the location, the date when the picture was taken, and so forth. Over here is more what we're interested in, the vegetation type right there. That's going to be the different ecosystems. And so you can see savanna and limestone gorge. Those are 2 out of the 4. Then there's a few parts that you need for part 4, like human structure and distance to the closest human, and water type and distance. But over here is now where it says species. This is what you were doing when you were on the website identifying the different animals in the pictures, right? You had to figure out what kind of organism it was, how many of them there were they resting, standing, moving, eating, interacting, were they young, how many horns, and then over here on the right, you can just click on these links and it will actually take you to the actual picture that all this data is from. There's some baboons. Hello, monkeys. So that's all the things that are on the data table, right? These are all the data that was collected by the citizen scientists on the website. But we're, of course, interested in the species, right? We want to know for biodiversity how many different species there are, right? And so you'll notice that they're all intermixed, right? They're not all together. So you would have to go through and count all these. But there is a way that a data table can do this for you. At the top where it says data, you can sort the sheet according to that column, A to Z, Z to A. So if I do that, hopefully, it will then group all of them together, right? And so there's this many aardvarks out there. But then you get down to the baboons. Oh, there's lots of baboons. And then you start scrolling and you start to see, man, there's a lot of baboons. And so then you start to realize that this spreadsheet is huge. It goes down and down and down and on and on and on and on until you get to the bottom where you notice that there are 40,000 entries in this data set, right? And so I don't think you really want to count all those things. This way of using the data is not going to work. So I'm going to undo what I just did because that's not helpful. Instead, we're going to use the spreadsheet to do a bunch of data for us. So here at the top, we're going to go up and click on data and then come down to where it says pivot table. And so a pivot table is something that's going to basically do all the counting for us. So you're going to click that and you want it to go into a new sheet. You create it, and then at the bottom, you might notice that there's a new sheet. This is why they're called spreadsheets or Google Sheets, because you have these little tabs for the sheets. Now, one thing to notice here is that it suggested what we want to do with this. And if you read these average longitude for each month. Longitude is the distance east or west from the 0 longitude, which is in England or something. I forget exactly, but that's not something you can really average. They could count the different cameras. These are the things that Google thinks you want to do, which is one reason why you shouldn't just trust whatever Google tells you, because these things don't make any sense. Counting up latitudes is just, I don't even know how to explain how that doesn't make sense, but it doesn't. So I don't care about the suggestions. But what I do have are these parts here that say rows and columns, and I can add things. And so what I want to do and what we want to do is use this to look at the different ecosystems, which animals are in each ecosystem, and how many of them there are. So we have to add some rows to show that, right? And so we're going to go to here where it says rows and push add. And it's going to give us all these options, right? And so we want to look at the different ecosystems. That's under vegetation type. So I'm going to click vegetation type. And it's going to do some thinking. That's what the little bar there is. And look, here are all the different vegetation types. I didn't tell it that there was only 4. It went through and just looked to see how many different entries there were. There's only 4 different entries. Now, one thing to note on this is that the quality of your data set is important, in that if maybe somewhere in there you misspelled this one time and you put flood plan instead of floodplain, that would show up, right? Because that was one of the different things. The computer isn't smart enough to realize that you made a spelling mistake. It's just counting things. So now we have the data, or the ecosystem types, but that's not everything, right? We want to compare that against the species. What species are in there? So we go over to the rows and we go to species, and we add another row for the species. And so it's going to think, and then here we are. In the floodplain grassland, here are all the different species that were found there, right? And so you can go here and count them, right? We could just figure out, well, it starts at the 2. You can see it's on line 2, and it goes all the way down to 34. So actually that makes probably 33 different species. I'm not going to sit here and count those, right? So you could count those, and then you could count all these in the floodplain grasslands, or sorry, the limestone gorge, and so forth. But again, here is where we can help ourselves out a little bit using the spreadsheet. You can click anywhere, but I'm going to click over here somewhere away from where we're working, and I'm going to put some formulas, right? We can use this. So I'm going to type in the equal sign, and that tells it we're going to do a formula. And then you start to type in the word count, because we want it to count things. We don't want it to do all some of these. Look, there's a lot of counts. We want it to count if. Count if. So you count if. First, you got to tell it what to count. So I'm going to click over on the left, and I'm going to drag and select the whole part here, right? I want to count this whole area, but I need to tell it what to count for. And this part's a little weird. You got to put a comma. You have to do, what's that called? A parentheses, a star, which is above the 8, and another parentheses. That's not parentheses. Those are quotation marks. Quotation mark, star, quotation mark. And then I'm going to go up back where I was before. I'm going to hit enter. And it counted them, right? So there's 33 right there. Then I'm going to go down a line maybe, or I could put it again anywhere I want. I'm going to put in the equals and count. I want it to count if. And then I'm going to go down here to the second one, and I'm going to select all the ones here. So I told it what to count. Then I'm going to put a comma, a quotation mark, a star, and another quotation mark. And then I'm going to go back up, because I just like to keep everything where it is, and hit enter. And it counted that one, right? And so now I can see that the biodiversity, the richness of the floodplain and the limestone are very similar, 33 and 34, right? You can do the other 2 by doing the same thing. You got to practice doing this somehow, so I'm not going to do it all for you. Now, that's only for richness. We also want to do the Shannon diversity index, and we want to calculate the evenness. And to do that, we have to do some more calculations. And in particular, we need to get some numbers for each of these. So if I remember correctly here, we're going to go down here to where it says values. And then I'm going to put species count, right? I wanted to look at the species count of each line. And then down here, you'll notice I wanted to add it up. It says sum, right? Sum means add, right? So again, what it did was it went over here and it said, first we were only looking at the species column, but now we're looking, I want to count up all these things, not just each baboon part, but there was 5 baboons, and then there was 2 baboons, and then 3, and all that, right? So anyway, that's what it did, and it counted. And now I can see how many of each thing are in each area, and this is awesome. Now we could just start doing math, but there are, again, a lot of math problems you would have to do here. So we, again, are going to let the spreadsheet do a little bit of work. So I'm going to click up here, and I'm going to start labeling things. This one I'm going to call PI, right? This is the percentage of the population, right, from the Shannon Diversity Index. Next to it, I'm going to put LN of PI, because that's one of the other parts of the Shannon Diversity Index. And then I'm going to put the whole thing, PI times LN of my PI, right? Because those are all the things that we need. And we have to do that for each of these each species. So again, we can let the computer do a lot of the work for us. If you remember, the PI is equal to the individual species number divided by the total species number. So right here in this box, I'm going to put an equals there because, again, I'm doing a formula. And I'm going to say I want it to divide this divided by the total, right? I selected the aardvark number divided by the total number. And then I'm going to hit enter. And there's my percentage. And then I'm going to go down to the next one. I'm going to put it in equals, and I'm going to say take this, the baboon number, and divide it by the total number, except I forgot to put divided by. I did the baboons divided by, right? That's the forward slash, and then divided by that number. And then I hit enter, right? And I have to just keep going down here and selecting them. Make sure to put the division symbol. Go to the total and hit enter, right? You're just going down the row and you're going to do that. You need to do that for the whole table. This is the most time-consuming part, but it is just a bunch of clicking, and it goes pretty fast once you get the hang of it. Now, I want to take these numbers and start to do other things with them, like find the natural log of each of these numbers. So in this box, I need to do another math problem. Now, again, you could just type this in your calculator, or we can come over to here where it says functions. A function is another way of saying math problem. We want to go down to where it says math. And then we'll go over to where it says ln for the natural log, right? So I'm going to hit that. And then you'll see it puts a for real parentheses this time. What do I want it to take the natural log of? I click the box that I wanted to do the natural log of, and I hit enter. And there's the answer, right? For the next one, I do the same thing, can go over here, and I can go to math, and I can go to natural log of this one, and hit enter. And I keep going like that, right? But there is an interesting thing that you can do. I'm going to get rid of this for a second. Once you do the first one, you highlight the first box that has the formula up here in it, and then you drag it down, and it just does it all for you. And if you notice, when I go to the formulas, it's doing the same formula, but it went down. It started at the log of D2, which is this one. Then underneath it, it did the log of D3, which is that one, and D4, right? And if I would have done all of these, I could have dragged this all the way down the page, and it would have done all the math automatically for me, right? So that saves you some time. Now, we still have to do the final column here for the Shannon Diversity Index. We have to multiply these things together. So maybe you're getting the hang of this now. We want to put an equal sign. And then I want it to take the first PI and multiply it, which is the star button right above the 8, and then multiply it times that and hit equals. And there is the diversity index for the aardvarks. Once again, I can keep doing that over and over, or I could take this little section right on the little corner of the dot and drag that down, and it's going to do the whole thing for me, right? Now, in the end, you do have to make this go all the way down to where it says total. And if you remember, you would then want to add up this whole column. So again, I'm not going to do the whole thing for you, but I'm going to show you that down here, you could put equals, and then you could go over here and put, up at the top, sum, and then tell it what to sum up. And you hit enter, and it adds the whole thing together, right? So you get the whole column going, and then at the bottom, you can make it add everything together by using this sum function, like so. And so then we would end up with our Shannon diversity index, right? Then that just leaves us with the evenness number. Now, the evenness number is the Shannon diversity index divided by the natural logarithm of the richness. So in the floodplain, we want to take the Shannon diversity index, which I just figured out, which, again, this isn't the correct number, but let's say that it's equal to the sum. I don't think I should have gotten rid of that one, of these. Right? So let's say this is my Shannon diversity index. That's my H. I need to take that and divide it by the logarithm of the richness. So here's my richness, right? If you remember, this is the richness number. So in this box, I can put a formula for the math for the ln. Oop, I went too far. Ln of this. And that didn't work. So that's strange. It's because it's a negative number, I think. Should be greater than 0. It even told me that because I needed to change this to a positive, right? And so that's going to make my life a little bit more difficult at the moment. And so maybe this time I'm not going to choose to tell it to use the row. I'm going to make it do the natural log of, and I'm just going to type in 0.38. And then I get a number, right? Now, in the end, this is the H max is what it was called. I am going to have to take equals this number divided by this number. And that's my evenness number. Now, I didn't label things very well here. Labeling things would be good. I was doing well over here with the labeling, and then I kind of broke down on these numbers, right? But labeling things would be good. And in any case, this should now give you enough information to at least get started on calculating all of these pieces of information that you need, so that you can then make a claim about which vegetation type, which ecosystem is the best in terms of biodiversity, right? So there you have it, part 3 of the assignment.